Good morning, everyone. My name is Marit Schnepp. I'm working for the Europark Federation, and it's a pleasure for me to welcome you to our webinar on stakeholder engagement in conservation. How can we create meaningful engagement in order to have better conservation outcomes? I'm really excited to have three very experienced speakers with us today and looking forward to their presentation. This webinar is organized by Europark as part of the NaturaConnect project and our online learning module on stakeholder engagement. So before we start, just a very short reminder to all participants. Of course, this webinar is being recorded, so feel free to start and stop your video as you prefer. The recording will be available on our websites, and we, of course, will share it also with all participants at the end of the session. If you have any question or comments, just type it in the Zoom box, and we will, indicating the speaker that you would like to address, and we will have time to pick that up after the presentations. And very important, please remain muted just to avoid any interference noises from the background. I would like to start with a very short Mentimeter question. We probably all have made some experiences with stakeholder engagement in our life. So I would just like to get an idea and a better picture of what that exactly means to you. So I would ask you to finish this sentence. Stakeholder engagement for me is... So it can be anything. Just be creative and give yourself a few minutes to think about it. You have to go to menti.com and enter the code 599830542. Should also appear in the chat now. And yeah, you will have a few minutes while I continue with the presentation, and then we come back to that and see what are your ideas. What do you feel about stakeholder engagement to see that in a word cloud? Just for those who don't know Europark Federation, we are the biggest network of protected areas and parks in Europe. Last year, we celebrated 50 years, which is really a big achievement. We have more than 400 members in more than 40 countries. And our members are mainly protected areas and other conservation areas, parks, but also NGOs and national government organization or local regional government agencies. And we are working and supporting the parks to fulfill their role and to support them in their work, basically. So how we do that, we facilitate networking and we organize conferences, workshops, seminars, webinars, of course, and capacity building is a big aspect. We have commissions and task forces that work on different specific topics, for example, management effectiveness, healthy parks, healthy people, or other topics that are important for parks. We also do a lot of policy work and represent parks and protected areas on the policy level. You're very welcome to follow us on our channel, social media, and website if you would like to know more about us. We are very active there, and you can really follow and see the work that we are doing and that the parks are doing across Europe. We are involved in different projects, Life Enable, which is a capacity building project, the Green Health, which is on the biodiversity project and human health relation. And since this year, we also have a project on marine protected areas. And of course, the NaturaConnect. So this webinar is taking part in the context of NaturaConnect, which is a Horizon Europe project, which means that it's really research oriented. We are working with academia and the scientists, and it's a Horizon Europe program running for 4 years until 2026. The main objective of this project is to co-create with decision makers and stakeholders tools, knowledge, and capacity building that can help the European member states to realize an ecologically representative, resilient, and well-connected network of conserved areas across Europe. So achieving the objectives of the biodiversity strategy and 30 by 30 target. If you want to find out more on the project, you're very welcome to visit our website. And just as a background, this webinar is part of the NaturaConnect learning platform. So that is the work that Europark is doing within this project. We are building a capacity building hub that will help people or build the capacity in spatial conservation planning. We have launched this platform in April this year. It's freely available online, and we continue to add more modules on different topics related to spatial planning. The modules that are already available are on the Nature Futures framework, on stakeholder engagement. So you're very welcome to visit that site and also provide your feedback, because that we can use to really build on the modules that are still to come. So with that, I would just go back and see if we have some responses in the word cloud and what stakeholder engagement means. Wow, we have a lot of responses, 97. So collaborative, essential, yes. Challenging also, complex, necessary, fundamental, important. I'm just picking up some of them because it's the first time I see it, and it's nice to see a lot of different opinions. Dialogue, relationship building, enjoyable. Yeah, it's quite a mix of it's more positive, which is nice. Needs time and space. Totally. Yeah, I found it sometimes challenging, and it seems that we speak the same language, but still we are engaging with so many different people with different backgrounds, different knowledge and experience, and somehow this can be challenging for sure. And sometimes we don't even speak the same language, and we have in addition cultural differences. So yeah, it's an interesting process, and yeah, nice to see what all of you think as well. Feel free to keep adding on this, or to also share experiences in the chat. Yeah, that's always nice to exchange on it. Coming back to today, so I'm very happy that we have 3 different speakers that will share their own experiences. Today with us is Christian Pjonstad, director at the NaturaConnect in Norway. We have Hildegard Meyer. She's a project manager at WWF Central and Eastern Europe. And we have Eva Maria Kattun, who is working for Lech Alps in Austria. And yeah, I'm really happy to hear their own very different experiences on engagement, participatory approaches, and also how to avoid conflict, to not let it happen. But if so, then how can we deal with it? And all of them are very enthusiastic about this topic. And yeah, we will start with Christian Pjonstad. So I will just hand over to him. And yeah, looking forward to your presentation, Christian.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you, Marit. And thank you, NaturaConnect and Europark. I'm going to share my presentation here first. Let's see. All right. I hope you see that.
Yes.
Well, yeah, great. Well, thank you all participants. You are stakeholders in this webinar, and I'm sure that combined knowledge and experience that you have will help us be better at stakeholder engagement in conservation. And I noticed from the Mentimeter that it's collaborative that's important, and challenging. It is very challenging. I can't deny that. But I also noticed something on the side there. It said needs time and space. And that's something I'm going to focus on today. Because in my experience, I have done this for over 20 years now. And I come from a very bottom-up approach towards this in building regional parks in Norway. And also our type of parks, the nature regional landscape parks, has a very sort of collaborative and more integrated way of working compared to other conservation areas. But hopefully I will be able to share some insight with you from my experience and from my thinking. And I hope that can inspire you in your work ahead. So I'm going to give you the main points already right away, because I think that to build connectivity in nature and to build connectivity with nature, we need to connect more with people and their nature values in their own landscapes. So we need to think larger. We need to think at a landscape scale. We need to design processes that values a variety of nature values. And we also need to organize for the long term by formalizing partnerships and perhaps establish parks and other conservation concepts. So this is what I'm going to talk about today. First, I want to share a little bit of a personal story about the challenges of this work. Well, Norway is situated far north, as you know, and here's a picture of me in beautiful spring weather, as far north as you can get in Norway. This is actually north of Alaska. It's east of Istanbul. It's right on the Russian border. It's an area with many interests. It has many different, what can I say, stakeholders here. We have the indigenous Sami people. We have fishermen. We have farmers. We have the military installations here. It's a very tense area, especially now. And we do also have a national park here in this area as well. So we have many different interests, and this is where we have spent quite a bit of time developing a process with different stakeholders. And I have to say, this area has challenged me quite a bit. I think I like a challenge, and I just want to mention a little bit a small episode there where I talked a lot about the park in itself, about how to establish a park and the benefits of that and all that. And then I got a comment from a Sami indigenous person. And he said, well, I like everything you say. I just don't like park. And that I stopped me in my tracks there, and I had to rethink a bit. Because he was coming from an indigenous angle where parks, reserves, anything that can connect to that is negative. So we had a very good conversation about enclosures, for example, where well, they do enclose the reindeers. They enclose something valuable. It doesn't mean that it has to be closed all the time. So we got some very good conversations around this, and but it sort of stopped me thinking, because we have to be careful not promoting our tools. We have to really take into consideration the nature values and the people and the values and their concern, the people's concern in the areas that we are working with. So that brought me home, and I thought a lot about that, and I'm going to come back to this example later on in my presentation as well. So what is underneath everything here? I think actually we're talking about a crisis of connection, because there is plenty of separation, and that's underlying a lot of our problems, the crisis that we are seeing today, the separation of us and nature, the separation between people. So there's a lot of loss of connection out there. And I think it's very urgent that we work on this, and stakeholder engagement is a very important work in order to bring more integration, in order to bring new connections perhaps in our processes. So it's very valuable, and you as people who are going to work on this or are already working with stakeholder engagement, you are really weavers. We really need weavers to bridge gaps and to bridge the silos and sectors that exist out there. So it is really a valuable work that we are into here. We can't forget that. And I come to this work through developing regional parks from the bottom up, basically, in Norway. We have 9 regional parks in Norway right now, 40 municipalities, several hundred partners and stakeholders, new park projects on the way. That has been really my main job for the last 20 years. And I've been following these and advising and following and doing workshops all across Norway, in the deep forests of the east, in the mountains, central mountains, in the fjords, and up in the Arctic areas. So it's been a very interesting but also challenging times. And I also have to mention that this type of work is ongoing all across Europe's nature regional landscape parks, which there are 900 parks all across Europe. And we do really promote and we do really work with stakeholder engagement in our type of parks, and I really value that. So we do have some experience with this. All right, let's go to build connectivity. I believe it's important to think larger, to think at a landscape scale, because we have to be a bit careful of falling into sectorized thinking, especially when we're working with nature. And maybe you have a natural science background. I have a social science background and a natural science background, so I try to connect the two, which is useful to me. But I think in order to avoid the worst mistakes, I think we should actually look at the landscape scale. That could be useful. And this is a landscape all the way west in Norway. This is where the Vikings set off across the North Atlantic 1,000 years ago. And this is a really valuable landscape, a coastal landscape. And the great thing about landscape scale is that you have nature here, you have culture, you have the past, and you have the future. So all of these things can be weaved together. But the problem is that we do work and think very sectorized, especially public authorities, unfortunately. So we do have very sectorized projects and initiatives. And somehow we need to bridge those sectors. And we do that in our landscape work and in establishing regional parks in Norway. And this is the Fjord Coast Regional and Geopark. And they work with partners, over 80 partners, close to 90 partners, and many municipalities in this area, in order basically to work at a landscape scale to both conserve the landscape, but also to develop their rural areas. So a landscape scale approach can be really useful in bringing people into this work. And I've noticed in my experience is that people love to talk about their own landscape. They want to talk about their own place and their connection to it. And if they do that together, they discover new things. Even though you've lived in an area, in a landscape for all of your life, you can all of a sudden discover new things. And that's, I think, is one of the most interesting things when these things appear in our processes. For example, in another park, the people there discovered that darkness, that was a value to them. We have dark areas. The rest of Europe is lit up by light pollution. We still have darkness. So that is something that can appear in these processes, which is very, very interesting. And there's from a recent workshop and a process that we're doing right outside Oslo. It's in an area that is about to be the first peri-urban regional park in Norway. We used a landscape approach that we called integrated landscape character assessment. I said initially that I was going to focus on the practical side of this, and but we do need to integrate a little bit of the thinking behind it too. But because the approach here is really an integrated approach, as you can see. So we try to analyze the landscape both with experts and stakeholders, and we try to get them to meet each other also. So the experts, they understand the landscape in one way, and then they can get checked with the people who actually live there, and you can have some great conversation about that. What's good with this approach, which is developed in Sweden actually together with Norwegians, is that it looks at both the what do we want to protect or to conserve, and what do we want to develop. So the potential in the landscape is also there, and this is quite important for many people. So you bring in all the views in this approach. Another approach I'd like to mention also is the common land approach with the 4 returns approach, and they focus on landscape restoration and regeneration. And this is also a very good way to use a language that people can connect with, because I think that many of us go into an area perhaps with a very much nature focus. And I hate to break it to you, not everyone is as interested in nature as we are here today. So I think we need to meet people in both when we talk about the financial returns, the social returns, and try also to bring in some inspiration for the long run. So how do you develop your work over maybe 20 years or so? So this is another example of a great approach in landscape scale approach. So to build connectivity, we need to adopt the landscape scale approach that I mentioned, but we also need to design processes that values a variety of nature values. And what's great with the NaturaConnect project is that they work quite a lot with the IPBES work on the diverse values and valuation of nature. I really recommend reading it. And I also hope that Simone will post a video in the chat now on this work, because this is really interesting. And of course, as you know, there are many ways of connecting to nature, and we do have many nature values. So this is a simplification, the one on the model on your left here. So there's basically a triangle here with the top one, nature for nature, sort of the intrinsic values of nature. Then you have nature for society, nature's benefits to people, and then nature as culture, well, living in harmony, people at one with nature. So let's keep that in mind, and I will try to connect some of our experience in both processes and also in conservation concepts on this model. And I'll bring you back up north again, north of Alaska. Here you see it's very close to the North Pole. And typically in processes up here, I mentioned that we do have many different stakeholders here, and you can see in the way people express their connection to the landscape. You can see these different what can I say, these different parts of the triangle. You can see it, for example, in nature for society, is that we need to make a living. We need development. You know, that's sort of that value. The more protectionist value is we need to protect Arctic nature. It's very vulnerable, especially in climate change. You hear that quite often. But also you hear the indigenous voice where they say, this is our cultural landscape. This is part of us. So what you call natural areas and national parks, this is our cultural landscape. It has been that for thousands of years. So these are typically in a process you would hear these arguments. And that's interesting in itself, and it can be quite challenging sometimes because and that's why I'm happy we have a mediator with us today also, because sometimes we as weavers and process leaders, we are in the middle here, and we are sort of the in-between person, and that can be quite challenging sometimes. But we do some processes here where we ask people to bring something that they cherish to the workshop, bring something that's important to them, and we focus on talking about that thing so that other people can see their connection to the landscape. So and that is a very helpful process or workshop, and we have a lot of interesting discussions and very good connections, both with the landscape and between people. And we often find common ground as well when we do this. So basically what's happening then in these workshops is that those people who are very caught up in hands, the hand, we need to do something. Those who are caught up in the head, like we need to do these challenging we need to protect nature. Those who bring in their souls, we need to bridge all of those with the heart, and that's what I think happens in these workshops. And it's very interesting to see. So that's just one example. Another example is the theory U, which I recommend you take a look at. You can design processes based on this, where people try to leave behind some of their preconceived notions. And that can always be a challenge in processes, that people are so stuck in their ways, so that you need to get everybody to open their minds, open their hearts, open their wills in order to really get somewhere in good processes. All right, I hope it's okay so far. I'm going to land with the last point that I'm making. To build connectivity, we need to organize for the long term. We need to formalize partnerships. And we do typically, in our parks, we formalize partnerships over time, where in the start, we build intentional agreements between a wide variety of partners. And then as the process goes on, and it can last for years, we formalize the agreements until we are all ready to establish a park in our area. But it has to mature. Partnerships has to mature. And conservation approaches, we have different conservation approaches when, you all know about national parks. And national parks is not the same across Europe. There are different ways of practicing national parks. And my point here is that there is a diversity of conservation approaches. And I think you need to see this in relation to stakeholder approaches and also, of course, nature values. So this is where it gets interesting. For example, when we think about the natures for society, at the bottom right hand side, you can look into the OSCM areas, which is a new conservation concept coming up now, which is very interesting. And furthermore, if you are working with indigenous people or community conservation, you could look into the ICA areas. That's a conservation approach that's a very bottom-up approach, very in tune with indigenous people. And of course, we have the nature regional landscape parks, which is sort of a fusion of many of these approaches. So here is where I try to connect them in our nature values. And I think it's important if you are working in a conservation concept or a park or that there's a variety here, and that you can, there is not only one set of tools that you can use here in building for the long run. And hopefully in the future this could merge together and more in harmony. well, we will see if we can get to that in the future. So basically, what I've done now is that in order to build connectivity, we need to connect more with people and their nature values in their own landscapes. We need to think larger. We need to design processes that values a variety of nature values. And we need to organize for the long term by formalizing partnerships, and also to be aware of the different conservation concepts that are out there that can help you in your stakeholder engagement. Lastly, I'd like to just leave you with a finishing quote from Patrick Geddes. We usually go to the United States to look at inspiring people in our parks, but we do have many in Europe as well. So he said that in his time in the industrial age in the 1800s, that, and it is as relevant today. Our greatest need today is to grasp life as a whole, to see its many sides in their proper relations, but we must have a practical as well as a philosophical interest in such an integrated view of life. I think that's a very good quote, and he's also behind the quote, "Think global, act local." So he's a very interesting guy, and is also behind a lot of bioregional thinking. So if you want to read some interesting books, then search him up. Also search us up. We are the NRL Parks of Europe. We are a nice bunch of people who work all across Europe. We have published some interesting publications, so learn more about us and also connect with us through Europark. So that's basically what I had today, Marit. Thank you.
Thank you, Christian. Thank you very much. I think that was very inspiring, and I have a sense of calm in me now because it seems like it works very well in Norway. And well, you probably, as you mentioned, you also have some challenges, but
yes.
It's good to have these approaches and that you shared them as well. And actually, there was a question also if you could share some of these resources to the methods that you just explained for the landscape approaches, that we have the direct link. But yeah, that was very interesting, very nice to hear. We don't have any question in the chat, but please feel free, everyone, to post anything if you have a question to Christian. We still have a few minutes if there's anything upcoming. And yeah, it's thank you also for making this connection to the nature values and to the IBIS triangle. We use that a lot in the NaturaConnect project, as you said. And it's actually one of the modules that we already have on the learning platform. So if you're interested in the topic, you can check that out and just learn more about it. I think it's more an interpretation as well, right? As how each of us interpret our own area and context and landscape, and it cannot be applied in different fields of work. It's quite complex as well, but it's you can dive into it slowly. Yeah, I don't see any other questions, but as said, please feel free to just post if any. But with that, we can just move on to our next speaker. That is Hildegard Meyer. She's working for WWF, Central and Eastern Europe, and she also has a wide, extensive background on connectivity projects in the Danube-Carpathian region. She has been working a lot with people, and yeah, that's also her expertise in a way. And she will share her experience from an NGO perspective, so a different side angle on that whole aspect. And yeah, thank you, Hildegard, for being with us today. And I'm handing over to you for your presentation.
Thank you very much, Marit. Thanks for the invitation and good morning to everybody. Thanks for the invitation to speak about stakeholder engagement today, which is really at the heart of my work. And as you said, I'm working for WWF, who has been leading various projects related to connectivity conservation. So we talk here about connectivity in another angle than Christian said before. Both are super important and super interesting. So we are talking about connectivity in terms of landscape and nature connectivity. We are working in the Danube-Carpathian region, and stakeholder engagement is a substantial part of our work. We are working in different fields of expertise: forestry, freshwater, footprints, and ecological connectivity in relation to wildlife. And I will be talking about our experiences, approaches, and lessons learned. Since I work for WWF, I will, as Marit already said, talk about from an NGO perspective. So what will be the content of my presentation? First of all, I would like to give you a short introduction to the ecological connectivity and why we need it, so that you see the scene where we are working in and what are our drivers. Then I would touch upon about the arguments. So why do we engage with stakeholders from an NGO perspective, as already said. And then I brought two different examples on stakeholder engagement approaches and results at different levels. So we are working at the local and cross-border level, but also at the international level. And then I would like to tell you a little bit about our lessons learned. And yeah, this will be my presentation. First of all, I would like to draw your attention to the Carpathian Convention, to the Carpathian region here. You see the map. Here we have the region with countries, Czech Republic, Slovakia, Ukraine, Romania, Serbia, and Hungary that have a share in this region. It's a very biodiversity-rich region, a hotspot in Europe, let's say, and this region harbors a significant part of the Europe's wildlife. So it's 1/3 of brown bears, gray wolves, and Eurasian lynx in average, so that you have a glimpse where we are working. What is ecological connectivity? I also wanted to bring to your attention, because you might not work on ecological connectivity. The definition that IUCN worked on is that ecological connectivity is the unembedded movement of species and the flow of natural processes that sustain life on our Earth. And when we seek to establish ecological networks for conservation, we can speak about a system of core habitats, like protected areas that are connected by ecological corridors, which is established, which we would like to establish. And it's also related to the biodiversity strategy of the European Union. And yeah, it helps to maintain and to conserve biological diversity in systems that have been fragmented. So why do we need this ecological connectivity? First of all, it supports the conservation of biodiversity. It supports the movement of animals through the landscapes. They need it for mating, food, and shelter. It helps us for the resilience and stability of ecosystems, We, as you all know, we have natural fluctuations like floods or landslides, and also for climate change. And then it also supports us with ecosystem services we all depend on. We can say that nature needs space for that, and this is what we would like to work for and to keep and preserve. Then we can talk about the role of stakeholder of NGOs in stakeholder engagement. So what is our role as WWF in stakeholder engagement? We run projects together with many different partners from different sectors, so we are not alone. But our role might be, we can define as that we are watchdogs that can discover projects and their consequences for the local communities, for example. NGOs can inform people concerned and bring them together, and bring together the important players to discuss the issue. We can have the role of a mediator between different stakeholders, including also different levels in our case. And NGOs, it was said, can speak freely about problems without a hidden agenda. And these roles were elaborated in an exercise we did together with the other sectors, so representatives from the Science, Transport and Authority and international organizations, and representatives of the sector selected 5 keywords describing NGOs, and inspired by these keywords, illustrator Sibylle Vogel painted the picture you can see here, and sometimes a picture says more than 1,000 words. So why do we engage with stakeholders? We cannot do all on our own, and stakeholders are often not aware of the importance, in our case, of the ecological connectivity, which is a relatively new aspect of nature conservation. If we want to build a robust ecological network, we cannot talk only about protected areas. Most of these network areas are outside of protected areas and used in different ways. So we have different stakeholders that have an interest in the land. We need alliances for respecting ecological corridors at the local level. Generally, there is no legally binding protection of ecological corridors. Thus, we need to rely on the willingness of stakeholders, and this starts with informing them and raising awareness. The public needs to be informed that the project is going on in their community and why. Then stakeholders might be out there that could be consulted for more information on the subject, like the hunters that know the places of interest. They might have data and want to share it with us and contribute to some field work or discussions. So in our case, we were intended to collaborate on a management plan for the region and reach an agreement for its implementation, discussions on the best mitigation measures to safeguard ecological connectivity. And we needed to organize and to reach a consensus. Since our projects are of short-term nature, we rely on local authorities or other stakeholders to take the process responsibility to implement the plans we develop together. Before starting a stakeholder engagement process for any type of activity, a thorough preparation is needed. So we need to settle the purpose. In our case, we needed the stakeholders to understand the importance of ecological connectivity, as I presented before, their possible contribution to identify and their role in safeguarding ecological connectivity. We need to mitigate potential risks and conflicts like uncertainty, dissatisfaction, misalignment, and resistance to change. We need to think of any questions or argument they might have that would hamper the process of collaboration. What is their opinion towards national authorities, the motorway company, or others that would like to change their surroundings? Is the project welcome, or is there resistance? So we need to go into details and to see what kind of stakeholders are there and how we can handle, and what are the attitudes, the desires, the knowledge, and the social rules and leadership in the certain area we want to work. Then we can somehow group the stakeholders. You see this graph, which shows the influence and power of stakeholders versus the interest of the stakeholders. And our intention is that if we have stakeholders with high power but low interest, to shift them from the upper left corner to the upper right corner, to be engaged with them closely and to have and to support our intentions better. So I would like to bring you an example at the local level. Let's turn, as you can see here, you need a common vision that is important. So this is a picture of one of our excursions with the stakeholders in the region of Piatra Craiului National Park in Romania. So what was the purpose of the engagement in this region? Or at all. I mean, we have conducted many projects, and we have different pilot areas, and in each of these pilot areas of a size, protected areas and their surroundings, for example, or this is more or less the size. We are working partly cross-border. We are working partly at the national level in pilot areas. So we need also our purpose there was to plan together for safeguarding ecological corridors in the pilot area. This included to identify and verify ecological corridors, to identify the critical areas where people hamper the permeability of ecological corridors, and to plan measures to safeguard ecological corridors, and to develop an action plan or a catalog of measures. And this was done in certain pilot areas. So what I can tell you about the process is, first of all, get to know your stakeholders. We did a stakeholder analysis report for each of these pilot areas. We elaborated who is important, who is an opinion leader, who are the opponents, what are their arguments, and also to look at social cultural aspects like how hierarchy is embedded in such a community, for example. Then we prepared the content and the messages to inform our stakeholders. And we started to create a local working group. So a group of people from different sectors that would meet each other and throughout the entire process of creating the ecological network. These groups met 2 or 3 times a year, starting with a kickoff meeting where we explained what the issue was and how they can contribute. We also asked them to fill in a survey to get them know better. So how long have they been working in the field and what is their interest and so on, so that we have more interest and more information than we could gather beforehand. Often we could build on existing relationships with stakeholders, which made the process a little bit easier since the organization or the project partners are known in the area and important players' attitudes are known, and we knew already who to talk to. In case we needed to build connections from scratch in a municipality or smaller region, the situation is a little bit different. In one pilot area, we started with the mayor, who was a very open-minded person, and with the leaders of the hunting association in the region. In the next meeting, we involved more and more persons who were recommended by the mayor and the leader of the hunting association. So we could step by step create this working group and also build trust that we really would like to work together with them. What needs to be considered here is that seek to build good connections and trust with the working group. This includes many discussions, preferably personal meetings, and seek to present clearly what the issue is and why you want to engage with them, and many visuals helped. For example, a map of planned motorway people had not seen before, or graphics explaining the issue. Then you would also need to be clear about what you expect from stakeholders and how their discussion points or opinions or suggestions would be taken up, and what is their role in it. And then for robust outcomes, people need to understand and need to own actually the results. Also for organizing practical work, as we did, data collection and monitoring and analysis, we involved the stakeholders to make them part of the process. What were the results? So we were able to create this catalog of measures agreed with the local working group. We integrated local knowledge. We identified critical areas, and related to the critical areas, we defined together mitigation measures. The results also included that some of these mitigation measures have been were implemented where it was easy. because our projects are of short-term character, and we rely on that the results are taken up by the players at the local level. So some of these implementation measures were, for example, the location of the green bridge. We identified together with them, and together with the motorway company, for example, a documentation could be done, so that in the next step this green bridge will be built, for example. Or some simple measures like putting traffic signs along the road for speed limits to protect wildlife along a road. And by working along developing this catalog of measures, collaboration between local and national players could be improved. We invited national players to the local level, also to attach them to the area and to make them aware what it really means to build, for example, a motorway there, or to open up an ecological corridor. In Romania, as an example, when for the first time in such a meeting, the motorway plans were presented, and the local people realized that the access to their fields would be hampered through this motorway, it became evidently more important making the motorway more permeable, not only for wildlife, but also for local farmers. And the discussions during our meetings led to more measures along the motorway to improve the planning. Yeah, and of course, the awareness on the topic was raised also on the public, in the public. Then I have another example at the regional level. So you might know that we are working together a lot with the representatives of the Carpathian Convention and the working groups, especially on biodiversity, but also others. So one of our stakeholder engagement at this international level was the development of the joint strategic action plan for sustainable transportation infrastructure in the Carpathians. And we involved here the two Carpathian Convention working groups and their related observers. The purpose was to integrate biodiversity ecological connectivity into sustainable transport infrastructure development in the Carpathian region. So we started off with working together with an expert that provided the structure and content of the action plan. We organized a conference, a so-called cross-sectoral conference, where we invited representatives from the nature conservation, but also from the transport sector and spatial planning sector. In the setting of a World Café, participants elaborated topics that should be reflected in the action plan related to policy planning, tools, and monitoring. We had cross-sectoral discussions to elaborate concrete action points for the action plan, and people were grateful for the learning during this conference. So people mentioned, "Oh, I've never thought about the aspect of ecological corridors in relation to motorways, for example." So we had a personal learning going on during this conference. And also nature conservationists discovered the willingness of planners to do the right things, to work in a sustainable way. But if they do not know where, for example, ecological corridors are, they cannot do it. So it was a quite fruitful collaboration with them. In the next step, all these results of the conference, as you can see here in this word cloud, were integrated into this action plan. And another cross-sectoral meeting was organized of the Working Group on Biodiversity and the Working Group on Sustainable Transport and Spatial Planning. And this really laid out the agreement on the 6 objectives for the action plans. I will not mention it now, but there were 6 objectives related to the identification of current and potential ecological corridors, of future critical intersections, then the realization of green infrastructure and mitigation measures in the relation of transport infrastructure development, and also the approval and implementation of policies to support sustainable transport and the enhancement of public participation. Results thereof were that this joint strategic action plan with a duration from 21 to 26 was adopted at the Conference of the Party in autumn 2020 by the Carpathian Convention parties. And these action points that have been realized since then were the identification of ecological corridors and critical sections in the Carpathians with the help of the Connect Green project, and the approval and implementation of policies and tools. And this work was awarded by the Natura 2000 award in 2022, and we got it for cross-border cooperation and networking. So what were the lessons learned? I hope I'm still in time. What were the lessons learned? During our work in the region, there were many lessons learned. So first of all, this was also what Christian mentioned, never underestimate the time needed for stakeholder engagement. Reaching out to people, for example, landowners need a lot of preparation, finding common dates for meetings, join local meetings of associations to learn their mechanisms, to get more insights on what are the topics there, to adapt the program to make it better understandable for them. You also need to, in some cases, of course, there are some backlashes included when, for example, stakeholders block conservations. Then you need to start again and to need to approach these people from a different angle, which all needs time. And embed for this enough time for the during the project. Then, since the project were partly implemented in times of lockdowns, you all remember the Corona, we realized how important personal meetings were and how much faster things can be explained and trust can be built. And there is also a difference between the national and local level. We observed that some rules do not reach local players and they follow their own ones. For example, according to the law, it would have been possible to set up wildlife cameras in hunting areas in Austria with the permission of the hunting association, but the hunting association insisted of informing and getting the okay from all landowners involved. This already prolonged again the time working together with them. So we need to be aware also of the fact that land owners and users fear restrictions when you come along and say, okay, we need this area for ecological connectivity. So they do not want to change anything there. They want to have the right to do on their land whatever they want. So we would need to bring them fair offers so that they can manage economically also to contribute to the conservation of the ecological corridors. Then land alliances are important and still mechanisms for cross-sectoral cooperation need to be established, which is a bit of a lack, but we are trying hard to make these mechanisms up and working in the region. And generally, generally speaking, we need more long-term programs or projects to work along with all the stakeholders, because as you all know, changes in human behavior take time. This is also what Christian said before, and we all know that these changes in human behavior and attitudes take time. So let's take it. And I promise you, WWF is still driving the work around the establishment and integration of ecological connectivity in the Carpathians. And there is still a lot to do, and we will do it together with the stakeholders. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Hildegard. That was very interesting and good to hear from your side. And yeah, the time aspect is super important, and we should not underestimate it, the amount of time and relationship building that it takes to really come to a meaningful relationship between stakeholders, projects, and people involved. And that's also one of the questions in the chat, actually. How do you, do you have any experience what happens to stakeholder partnerships established during a project after it ends? So as you mentioned, the project ends, and then what's next?
I mean, we were lucky enough to have several projects in a row so that we could keep up working together with the stakeholders. But in the preparation of this presentation, I went back to our project partners and asked them how this catalog of measures or some other issues we have developed together with stakeholders in the project, how they are taken up. And in some cases, I have to say that the knowledge that was gathered and the data collected in the areas together with stakeholders are now part of the environmental impact assessment of the motorway planning in Romania, for example. So we see that they took up. In some cases, of course, everything is not considered. So you would need to start again. But I think what was left is that people talk to each other, let's say, easier. For example, the motorway company in Slovakia and the Nature Conservation Conservancy, they build a good relationship, for example, and they still work together on establishing green bridges in the south of Slovakia. So of course, not everything was implemented and could be implemented, but we see bits and pieces, and this gives hope that we so that we can continue.
Yeah, step by step. There was actually another question on the motorway that was very interesting, and how you managed to build the bridges, because the farmers had also an interest in that. And the question from Sana is, are the ecological corridors, for example, the ones helping to permeate the motorway, working for the wildlife? How much information is there about animal movements in those corridors? Do you have any information on that?
We try to establish monitoring. I mean, we ourselves did not build the motorways, I have to say. We just helped with the awareness raising. We helped with finding the right location and discussing with the motorway companies where to build it. It's a huge process in Austria. I know that it took 7 years to establish everything. But we also emphasize the need of monitoring, so to learn. Because if you build a green bridge, you cannot tick the box and say, okay, we built a green bridge, but you need to see if it functions or not. So in some cases, we see that it's functioning very, very nicely, but in other examples, we see that the landscape is designated for further development of housing or of industrial areas, and the area left and right of these bridges are getting less and less, and of course then these bridges are not used in the way it should be or it could be used, because there is too much disturbances around. So we are doing monitoring, and in some cases it works nice, in some cases the spatial planning is an issue.
Okay, thank you. Well, there's actually a lot of more questions for you in the chat. I would pick one more and then we move on because of the time. But yeah, you can also answer them in the chat. The other one is raised by Hector Camilo. He asked, or he says, I have seen that it's very common, the mistrust and tensions between local and national stakeholders all around the globe.
Yeah.
What was the best strategy to align and coordinate local interest with the national centralized interests?
I think we had a very good example in Romania where we brought in these national politicians to the countryside, and that it really helps when they are there in person, so that people can talk to them in person. I think this helped a lot in this, but it's not feasible every time. This is for sure, because who would leave the headquarters in the capital to have a meeting somewhere in the countryside? So you need to convince. But we saw that it helped and improved the plans, and also to build more trust in. But it's never a recipe that it's also kind of soft skills that you need to bring them together and not to escalate things. We also experienced escalation, so don't worry.
Yeah, that's also one of the questions, both to you and Christian. Maybe just that one before we move on. Have you been involved in public consultations or engagement processes where emotions have run high? And how have you handled these situations? So, yeah, did that happen to either of you? Can you elaborate a bit more on how did you handle this situation? It's a difficult question. It's probably a lot to say.
Well, Hildegard, I don't know do you want to start or?
Yeah, yes, I can. So once we had a meeting where we presented our plans for doing monitoring in the area and where we want to put or to place the cameras, and then we did not know. I mean, as I said in my presentation, there was the rule that if hunting associations allow for putting wildlife cameras to the places in the hunting area, then we would not need to ask landowners, because asking landowners includes also finding out who is the landowner and writing letters and whatever, asking for feedback and so on. And there was one man who was already quite known that he is an opponent. He stood up and said, "I feel betrayed. I don't want to work in this way. I'm a farmer and the landowner, and me as a landowner, if I'm not a hunter and participating in this meeting, I would not have known. I do not trust you at all." So we really needed to go back and really ask the landowners, because we cannot, this was our solution, that we avoid the super escalation. We found then out where the landowners are, and it took us 3 more months to to get our cameras posted there. So so we try to adapt and understand their point of view. So they had other rules.
Yeah, that's the thing. If it leads to we avoid the engagement to save time, but then it leads to conflicts, and in the end it takes more time. But yeah, Christian, you had something to share as well.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting to see, because our processes typically take several years, and during those years, some new project appears. For example, wind power, which has been a big thing here for the last few years, and we have very strong opposition groups for wind power, and it's kind of interesting to see that those two sides play out in the process. And it can be quite tense discussions where I see that they are not able to connect with what we are doing. They are there to just prove points all the time, and that delays the process, because everybody else is sort of they are not able to participate in a way. So it's sort of, I think it delayed the process for a year with this either you're for or against, but at least that you have very strong interest, sectoral interest, who come into the process, and they affect the process a lot. It can be really tense and really. But I also have to say about mistrust. We are lucky in the Nordic countries that we do have a general trust between people is quite high. Although of course we have conflicts and all that here too, but we do have a general, a good trust here, which is a good thing, I think.
Thank you. Yeah. Very good questions and nice discussions. Thanks for your inputs. And yeah, with that, I would hand over to Eva Maria Katun. She is an ecologist and mediator. So she's actually very experienced in participatory processes and also conflict management in conservation. In 2017, she founded the consulting office in Lechtalbst based in Tyrol. And yeah, very glad to have her here as well. And yeah, I'm looking forward to your presentation, Eva Maria. And with that, I'm just handing over to you for our last presentation today.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm very happy to be with you today also. And thank you very much also for these great case studies and examples from the first speakers. So it's you have put up already a lot of things where I can connect to, and that's a great pleasure to now go the step further and give you insights from our work as process supporters and mediators. So we are bringing in some new person in stakeholder processes, and I brought with me 2 case studies from Austria, where I want to just give some small insights which maybe are interesting and useful for you in your work. As Marit already mentioned, I'm the head of this consulting office. We are a small group working together, and we try to support public processes with environmental or regional development topics. And I would like to start by why is it important maybe to have different levels of considerations in participation processes, and where are maybe the tricky points in it. And I brought with me one slide which maybe summarizes it very well. If we speak of participation, why do we need to consider these 3 levels? So there is first the level of content, and content can create sometimes also problems or show up with problems and conflict topics maybe, because there are some issues in it where it's not easy, where we have complex issues where we can't find easy answers just to handle situations. And then we have this factual level where we really need to have an eye on. But there is not only content, we have people, and we have relationship level, and we have a lot of human factor in participation processes. So it's a lot about people. And especially in the environmental sector, we have a lot of stakeholders then also. And it means big groups, maybe a lot of people to handle. And we have this process level, this is procedural level, where we have these complex questions with a lot of people, and then we need to set up something which leads us to something which can help us to deal with a problem or to handle situations to get to common solutions. But yeah, there is a lot of things we need to do and to consider before going there. So we have maybe a multi-stage coordination to deliver. That means maybe we have a very local questions and we have very national ones, and altogether we have to have in mind that maybe some people do not speak with others anymore, and a lot of things come in there, and they all need to be addressed within the process. So we have these 3 levels of consideration, and this is, as the word in it already shows, complex at every level. So why I want to go further with the question, when is external process support and mediation especially helpful maybe? And this is from my point of view, and also and I would like to show it then with the case studies, why and where it could be helpful sometimes to have this third neutral party coming in, helping for the process support, and helping also if we need to do more mediative speech, more mediative behavior to go further in processes. And complex setting, especially regarding content, as I already mentioned, but also many different interests is one factor for it. And you can see at the photo also, big groups means many people involved, means many interests, many different interests. And interests, as already the speaker before mentioned, they are sometimes also hidden. We can't see what people are really here for, maybe. And I will show later on that this can also cause problems, but we can handle it. And the last point, which is very difficult for mediative work, is if it comes to conflict escalation, if there is more and more tension and maybe even aggression in the room or emotions, as you already mentioned, just not in the one moment, but for longer run, then it really gets difficult, because then we change our behavior in a lot of ways. And I will show you some aspects of it. I just have some time, so I can just pick some interesting aspects of it, but there are a lot of it, a lot of more for sure. One is the complexity. one factor for conflict dynamic and escalation is the question, if it gets complicated, then we have this situation of an avalanche of topics. So maybe in the beginning there was this question that we have the presence of wolves. So maybe the comeback or that the population gets higher, and so this is the first trigger point, and then this makes triggering the avalanche, and then we have a lot of other stuff in this avalanche, like it's the question about who is living on the countryside with this animal and who wants from the city something different for this topic, who has fear, and who is the expert, who has the expertise. Maybe there is a difficult economic situation also for some of them, or if they have to face this new challenge. There is the question of power, there's the question of freedom, liberty, autonomy. All of these are values also, as already mentioned. And there is the question of maybe a danger, and all these things come up with just one question in the beginning. And I just wanted to show you this because it shows that this is a lot about humans. Maybe in the first beginning we have a lot of a question which is linked to our understanding of nature, but paf, avalanche goes down, and then we have a lot of human things to take into mind. Sorry, the wrong direction. Yeah, and one more thing which is really also we need to consider is that we are also as beings very complex in our behavior. And there is this level of personal level, the individual. And there you can see a lot of words which have been already mentioned, as we have this question of values, which we are important for us. The knowledge, the identity, the interests, and all these things together influence our human behavior. But we are not isolated. We are in a social environment, and their social affiliation, relationships, norms play also a role. And then we have this factor of group dynamic, maybe. People are stronger together if they are in a group, and maybe they are stronger because they feel part of one group which is against another. So we have one more, also this question of identity. And that all brings dynamic in human behavior. And also the environment influences us. Maybe normally I go by bike to work, but if it is raining, I change maybe my behavior. So also all these factors can influence our human behavior. And this is part of my work. I am here as a mediator, as a process supporter, to concentrate on these factors, because I am there for doing this work to understand what is happening, to use methods to find out what is maybe behind the position and to find the interest behind it. So this is part of the work of a mediator, which is really there for this. I'm not there to be a part of a stakeholder. I'm not there to have the aim of for something special in mind. I can concentrate on these human factors. And when we have this example of one method, it's the Harvard concept. How can we come from positions to interests? If we keep the example of the comeback of wolves, we have maybe this position of I don't want to have wolves in the Alps, and the other says it's a part of ecosystem. So we have these positions. So this is the question of what. But there is a lot of questions behind it which explain us to why, and they give us an insight in what is my interests. And there are a lot of interests which are influencing our wishes, our behavior. And as Kristen already mentioned, it maybe there is also this opportunity to find common ground and common interests if we have a look on interests and do not keep or stay on the level of positions in the dialogue process. And I brought one case study with me from a rural development funded project, the Links Action Plan in Austria. And it maybe sounds from the title already a bit if there is already a species protection project running. But no, this is a project where the idea was to have somehow a pre-project phase, where the focus was really on involving all relevant stakeholders, bringing up the dialogue and asking what is needed to support in a follow-up project the survival of the lynx population in Austria. And so we have really the opportunity in this project to concentrate on building trust and cooperation among partners before even going immediately in the idea of speaking about solutions and possible measures. And this provides us room for all the concerns, all the hidden interests, all the emotions maybe which are linked to this topic before we are really discussing on the issue itself. And there was also already a lot of opportunity in this project, for example, to find common ground. And common ground doesn't not always mean on an overarching scale, to have the common objective, but maybe also in the setting, just to find what setting is great for everybody, or who can come to which place and would be open to work then with others. Also there we already can find common interests which are not easy to find if you don't have time for it, and you can concentrate on these issues. And there is also I'm sorry, it was too fast now. And there is one background knowledge we use in mediation work. This is a conflict escalation model from Friedrich Glasland. The aim for today is not to understand the whole model. I'm sorry, there is not the time for it, but this is a very helpful tool for us mediators to understand how is the situation and the escalation already going on. And it helps us to find, to get an idea if people still are open to talk to each other, or if there is already coalitions which are in place. People are not really speaking with each other more, they are taking actions, and they have really situation of mistrust. And maybe even they lose their faith if they come back to the dialogue. And this helps us. And if you can just have a look at level 2, in this level 2, we have four steps down on the way to deeper escalation. And in this part, mediation really comes up to be very crucial, because if you have mistrust, then it's difficult to speak with each other. So maybe there is an advantage in the fact that somebody else as a neutral party can come to you and speak and ask for your interests, or for why you're maybe not joining. Or even if you are inviting, maybe sometimes this is better, because then their responses are coming like, I'm sorry, I won't come to this event because it's clear that you want to have this agenda or something like this. But at least we get these emails, and then we can try to develop a dialogue based on these concerns which have been mentioned in some reactions like this. And there is also space if people do not want to speak anymore with each other. Even there we have possibility to deal with it. And there also the work of mediation is helpful. It's called sometimes also a shuttle mediation can be helpful. That means a neutral third party speaks first with the one group and then with the other, before bringing all together, because they maybe are so emotional, so aggressive or escalated in their behavior, that's not possible to immediately go and face the other. And this was also one project we had in Austria. It's not. There was also a projected area around, but it was not the main focus. It was around a big city. It's a big city for Austrian level. Sorry, in Innsbruck, and but there are a lot of mountain biking, illegal mountain biking through the forests, and the landowners have been very angry about these situations which had escalated, and so there was the situation that we needed to establish once more the willingness to come back to the table and to discuss. So we had to do some sort of a shuttle mediation process where we first went to the landowners, organized meetings where they really could bring up their concerns, and they have been heard. And then with this, step by step, we created one more the willingness to bring all group together and to start a working group on the issues. And then we could go further for finding solutions. So these were some examples just to show you that, yeah, sometimes it's not easy to just jump in and say, hello, here I am, let's go. Sometimes we need to do a lot of things before or in between, or sometimes in parallel. And to finish one thought, so it's the idea of this steps is that to show you sometimes it could be a marathon, and we need to go, and we need endurance to keep on going in participatory processes. And do main things are very important, and steps between also, but we need to try to be as open as possible for results. If we have already the results in mind, it's not easy to integrate and making participating others. And we should keep the doors always open and stay flexible, and this from the beginning till the end. So this means that this should be somehow our vision in collaboration and participation. And why is it worthwhile to do so? Focusing on good relationships and resilient networks. We have done I've been participating in one European project in 16 different countries where the issue was of the comeback of large carnivores in Europe. And we have seen that in countries where trust and relationships and networking have been existing and were quite dense, the more dense they are, the more resilient they are also for crisis, for escalation situations. And we do not go back to the beginning all the time if we have already some better network established. So it's worth to do so, and everything we do in this sense, it helps us to maybe not go too deep in the escalation levels if some difficulties arrive. Yeah, so it helps. Mediative work can help in reducing conflict escalation and social polarization. Polarization is also a big topic and has some other dynamics we need to understand. We try to use a lot of different techniques for de-escalation, conflict management, and process design to help in this way. And so we can strengthen the capacities for dialogue and cooperation among these involved parties above the differences, maybe, and also to even use differences and different interests to maybe gain also opportunity out of it, because then it's maybe something which is more sustainable in the long run also. And what a big question in this thing is also that we try to improve for social justice in conflict situation and establish these resilient networks. And just to show you in a final word, there is, coming from these European projects at different levels, we have created a small initiative all over Europe where we work together. These are a group of mediators and also academics who has accompanied some of these projects. And we have created this by an Erasmus Plus project. And we have also published some insights, because we have worked together and asked ourselves which methods, which tools can be helpful. Where are maybe some examples of entry and exit points of mediative work, because it can help at different stages maybe to bring in some more time and space for handle conflicts. And yeah, this was a very interesting project all over Europe. And if you're interested to have a look closer to these outputs which we have published, and you feel free to download them at our homepage. And yeah, with this, happy to answer some questions or hear your comments on this very interesting issue. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Eva Maria. It was very good to hear your perspective as well. I found it very interesting to also see a pre-project happening, because of course, if you have a project on bringing back a species, you already have your objectives that you want to achieve, and you have to deal with that. So it kind of limits you in a way. So having this pre-project is I found it a really nice way to create the way forward. When you introduced the conflict escalation model, I was wondering on which level that then goes into this into this model. Is it level 1, or it really depends on the situation that you had there, I guess?
It depends on the situation, and it depends on the issue, but especially for large carnivores, you have situations going down the scale to the level of threatening and even to damage. So it can be sabotage or even yeah, sometimes situations with guns or threatening, so it can be quite deep already. It doesn't mean that everybody is in this situation already, but incidents like this help us to understand how far we have gone already in several social questions concerning these topics.
Yeah. There was also another question in the chat from Sana. What are your tools to ensure that all participants feel comfortable to take part in the discussions, and discussions are not, so that discussions are not dominated by just some people?
Yeah, that's also the advantage of if you are the facilitator of a process, that you really can concentrate on this. And so it's our role and our work to bring up some dialogue rules, but it's not that I come there and I'm the dictator and say let's do like this, but it's something always we work out with the group, and we define with the group how we will try to work together, and then we can bring back sometimes if it is difficult, that we show up what we agreed on sometimes, or it doesn't mean that emotions have no place. We need to deal with emotions. Emotions are part of human behavior, so we can't leave them out. But we can handle them in a way. And one very important technique is leading by questioning. So that means that we do not stay in this negative emotion tunnel, but we can help us by questions to understand first, to give the time to live this emotional moment, but then to try to come back to a constructive level of exchange. And this is very crucial by several questions which can help to lead back to this dialogue.
Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, unfortunately, we are at the end of our webinar. Thank you very much for your great contributions and for all the questions that people post in the chat. I found it super interesting. Maybe a last word of all of you. There was a comment, is the relational level often the most underestimated level? And yeah, I would be curious to hear your point of view. And I felt that, yeah, all of you kind of, the time aspect is super important, and the relationship building seems to be the key for everything. But just to hear if you have any last words, please go ahead. Christian, do you want to start maybe?
Sure. Yeah, I do think that time is very important, and we can spend 5-6 years in pre-projects and processes. So that's how long it takes. It's about tens of workshops, all at different levels, at village levels, at the regional, sub-regional levels. So it just takes a lot of time if you want to do this well. But I also think another element is space, as how you connect to your own space. That relationship is very important. How people connect to their own landscape and place. That is a sort of a superpower in all processes, I think, because once you tap into that and their motivation to be there, and then that's a good place to start also, and try to connect.
Yeah, thank you. Hildegard, do you have some last words for us to share? If you want only. You're muted.
I can also see this time aspect in our work, and I also have to underline what Eva Maria said, that personal meetings and discussions before the big meetings take place. It's really important to follow this this trick, let's say. It helps to come to better conclusions and decisions. Thank you.
Yeah. And yeah, lastly, Eva Maria, anything to add on that?
I think the most important sometimes is to say, even if it gets emotional and even if there are a lot of conflict issues, stay curious, because if you stay curious, you show interest for the others and you stay open. And this is a very good condition to understand what is happening and maybe to find common solution.
Yeah,
Thank
beautiful. Thank you very much. And yeah, thank you so much for taking your time preparing the presentations. And thank you also to all the participants for having this interest in this topic. And hopefully it was helpful and inspiring for you. We will, of course, share the presentation and the recording with all of you. And yeah, there is also a link to a very short survey, evaluation survey in the chat for all the participants. So please, it would be great if you can fill it in so we can use it to improve next webinars and just to have a documentation. So yeah, with that, I close the webinar. Thank you very much. And yeah, have a wonderful day. Bye.